Did you know there is actually a flight attendant who's been living rent and mortgage free for over 10 years and that you have the possibility of doing the same? You have the option. There are certain distinctive ways that allow you to live rent and mortgage free. And one of them, obviously, is working for a fantastic airline that provides you with housing benefits. I think it's Qantas Airline she's working with, and very high end. Started out at one level, she moved up, and now she's been 10 years rent free. And that is a possibility for almost anybody. And that is especially important for single parents to be able to control your housing costs. And I've done multiple things throughout the years with my family, from resident manager to property manager to live-in manager, overseeing properties so that we could live rent free. So it's definitely a possibility. You cannot do it if there's incidents of domestic violence or substance abuse going on. That would not work in your situation, because whatever effort you make, it is not going to work with the person who is not committed to the same goals as you. But here are some of the ways that you can live rent and mortgage free as well as this flight attendant does. Number one, you can work as a resident manager at an apartment complex. So what does that mean? A resident manager typically lives on the property to ensure the property is clean. Essentially, the hallways are clean, there's vacuuming, the windows are Windex, things like that. You don't necessarily receive a salary for that. You typically just receive a free apartment. So that would be one option to live rent free. Option number two, work as a superintendent for a property management company. So what does a superintendent do? Typically, a superintendent is on call in the event of an emergency. Typically, they handle plumbing, electrical, carpentry issues. So in the middle of the night, if you have a toilet that has an issue, if your power goes out, you're having an issue with your laundry room, that sort of thing, that's when a superintendent would get involved. Any sort of emergencies. They probably collect rent as well. They take out the buckets for recycling and trash during the week, and they typically do receive a salary in addition to a free apartment. Some of them do not, that's very rare, but typically they do receive a salary with housing. Another way to live rent and mortgage free is to work as a property caretaker. Now, as a property caretaker, you probably have multiple roles. You're ensuring that the landscaping of the property is well taken care of. You're ensuring that the inside of the home is managed, and you're probably overseeing other staff, whether it's the housekeepers and vendors coming to the property. You're overseeing the limousine driver. You are managing the property when the owners are either out of the country traveling or something else is going on there at work. So that's a wonderful role. That's basically you're living there 24/7. You typically have your own little cottage or something on the property, and you are managing the whole property. And that can be a fun thing. Not always necessarily with a family. Some of them will not allow you to bring children, so it might not work, but there are people that will allow you to have your whole family present. Another term for the property caretaker might be estate manager. So you're managing everybody there and making sure the laundry is taken care of, the dry cleaning, everything on the property is taken care of. And that can be a very interesting and fun position if you're able to obtain it. Number four, and another really fun thing, is managing a storage facility with housing included. Now, this typically you can have your family with you. You usually got a 2-bedroom. It's going to depend on the storage facility, what they offer, what their services are, how big the units are, how many they have, and that can really be a good thing. You typically have a Monday through Friday option, possibly a few hours on Saturday, but that will allow you some freedom. You live there, you work there. I mean, typically when you have your housing and your work combined, that can be a little bit challenging, but you do have your housing taken care of, and that can be a great thing for single parents. It allows you to save. And right now we have a lot of people coming to the country, and they're either living in tents, living in the street, or whatever. And these could be some nice alternatives to depending on the government to take care of you. Number five, you can manage an apartment complex as a property manager, and that typically does come with an apartment. Either a property manager or a leasing agent, whichever. They usually give you either some discount on your housing, they give you a free apartment, but you get some sort of incentive that requires housing in addition to benefits, in addition to a salary. So that can be a really excellent way to not have housing costs. Number six is you can manage a single family home for an investor. Yes, many investors live in different states from where their property is located, and they need somebody to look at the property to ensure whether it's the maintenance needs to be taken care of, whether it's snow, landscaping, whatever, because if you don't, then whoever is in charge in the town going around looking at the property, inspecting the properties will fine you. So you living on the property actually saves the investor money, and it lets them know when there's a problem. You want to make sure there's no fires, things like that. You're there. You're the person who reports to the investor. Number 7, find employment that provides housing or has housing assistance. And this is so many different places. I know of someone who worked for Merck pharmaceutical company, and they actually paid for her relocation, everything, helped her buy the home, gave her the down payment, gave her the money, helped her move. It was a really, really wonderful experience. And many of the pharmaceutical companies do have a lot of great benefits like that, but they are not the only ones. There's housing assistance in a variety of fields. So you would just need to check and see what the perks are for that position. Typically, they tell you up front. Years ago, we managed in a retirement community. So that is when they would bring in couples to manage the housing. There were some that had families, some that did not. Is it demanding? Absolutely. But there's definitely programs where they have housing included. I mean, some of the farms and things, I know they provide housing for people. There's a lot of variety of things. You just have to check into it, and you have to make sure you're safe and make sure where you're working, it's legitimate what they're offering you. Number 8, maybe something you haven't thought about, is housing swap. So maybe where you live, you've outgrown it, or it's not affordable, but somebody else is looking for that property for whatever reason. And perhaps you can go and move into where they live. Maybe it's smaller or something a little bit less. And you can kind of swap if that is allowed. If subleasing is allowed, temporary housing is allowed. You just have to see what's in the leases, but there's a lot of options out there. And swapping can be a nice alternative to avoid having rent and mortgage payments. When I was in college, one of my instructors, she was actually a nanny. While she was getting her PhD, she was a live-in nanny and babysitter. And a lot of times, parents love very educated nannies and babysitters. You don't necessarily have to be, you don't even have to have a bachelor's. But I'm just saying, a lot of times when you're doing nanny work or babysitting, that you can have live-in and as that as well. So that's a great option, especially when you have a family. I met actually a very good friend that way. It was a live-in position for myself and my children, and she had 2 children, and she was a pilot, and her husband was a pilot also, so they're both flying and out of the country sometimes, so they needed somebody to live with the children. So there can be really, really wonderful options and opportunities if you just kind of look into them. And no family is the same. So talk to different people, see what their options are, what they're offering before you make a decision. We hear a lot of talk about Jeff Bezos' yacht, the Amazon founder, and he's not the only one. Mark Cuban's got a yacht. There's a lot of yachts out there, but did you know there are actually deckhands and people who manage and take care of these properties? They live on the houseboat or they live on the yacht, and they manage it for the people while they're traveling. So there are some really interesting things. And a bonus that I haven't told you about is there are people now that are living on cruise ships. You do unfortunately have to pay for that up front, but once you pay for it, that's it. You don't have any maintenance costs, you don't have any utilities costs, you don't have any food costs or anything. So there are people that are doing that as an alternative to rent and mortgage. You could actually live on a cruise ship, work on a cruise ship. So there's a lot of things out there. Not just the flight attendants have these wonderful perks. There are a lot of options out there with various companies, whether it's the Googles and the Facebooks and stuff. There are companies that will pay you to pay for your housing and give you some really interesting perks. So keep up the great work. Keep looking for alternatives to housing, to rent, to mortgage. Sonia Gallen-Comunica, SoniaGallen-Comunica.com, and the author of 10 Things I Wish I Knew as a Single Parent, where we talk about all things single parents, finances, and our goal is to make the kids safe by educating their parents.